Now, our special guest today is Azure Moyna. Now, she's a writer and a coach. She holds a master's degree in regulatory affairs, a bachelor's degree in animal psychology and neuroscience, and she's also a certified coach in eating psychology. She has overcome child abuse and that resulting in eating disorder, and she is passionate about coaching and writing about issues relating to food, body, mental illness, familial dysfunction, and suicidal treatment of overweight people and the healing journey. Welcome, Azure. Tell our listeners about yourself and about your story.
Thank you so much for having me. As Bernadine said, my name is Azure, and I'm a coach and writer specializing in eating psychology. And so my personal journey started with just a personal struggle, lifelong struggle with food and body. And originally, I didn't realize the extent of it. I knew that I always was kind of a huskier kid growing up. I knew that I had these behaviors that I later realized were more disordered, sneaking food, using food to self-soothe and that type of thing. And, but really I thought that the problem was a character defect in myself and that the solution was more dieting. And the pendulum swinging between kind of binging behavior and then compulsive dieting, extreme dieting, compulsive exercise type of behavior, it just started swinging wider and wider and wider. And there came a point in my late 20s where it really caused me to start looking at this as a disorder and caused me to start seeking treatment myself. And that work led me to become a certified coach in eating psychology and writing this memoir to help other women who may identify with it and to help people who don't personally identify with it have context and develop more compassion for people who may have these types of issues.
That is wonderful. Your story is very it's amazing, and it's sad as well, if I can say that. You wrote a book, and the book's called Fullness. I didn't read the book yet. I'm planning to read the book, but can you tell our listeners what this book is all about, and just overall, what is this book about?
Sure. So this book is my very personal journey. It's a very deeply personal book, and it starts with something that happened in my late 20s. And when I was 28, I had finished my master's, had gotten a new management job, bought a new house, and had recently gotten married. And so many things in my life I thought were finally coming together the way that I thought, and I thought I had overcome my past. And when in fact, there was still so much to contend with, and so much was sort of secretly out of control. And so there was a particular evening where I had a binge, and I woke up in the middle of the night choking on my own vomit. And so that was really, in addiction terms, was my rock bottom moment, and made me realize that even though I had always known that my relationship with food and body seemed to be different from my friends, that there was something more to this. This was something very serious, and that, I could, it felt like a very life and death thing in that moment. And so that really was the impetus for me to start my whole healing journey. And so this book really kind of starts at that point and chronicles my healing journey, and in flashback has a parallel timeline of my childhood, and there's links between childhood experiences and my adult relationship with food and body. And so it's sort of these parallel paths between adult Azure and childhood Azure. And it's a very raw and real, brutally honest, but insightful type of book. And it's been well received so far. So I'm very excited to share this with as many women as possible, because I think there's so much healing power in this work.
Yeah, I can't wait to read the book. You know, what stood out for me, you telling, you know, sometimes people, you know, with this disorder, or when they're eating, binge eating, I'm a recovered emotional eater. You know, you try to fill that hole, that empty hole, with food. And food's like your friend, and it just makes you feel better. Can you tell us what, you know, compulsive overeating disorder, what signs can people look out for? You know, I mean, if somebody's listening now and they say, yeah, but I'm just, you know, emotional eating, or I'm just binge eating, or what signs, you know, can people look out for to know that they are suffering from this disorder, you know, and how can I overcome it?
Sure. So there's clinical diagnostic criteria that's available online that you can then discuss with a medical professional or a mental health professional, or a coach if you'd like to go that route. And some of the criteria includes things like eating past the point of satiation, food being more of a friend, like you said. That's definitely one of the types of criteria. Yeah, in general, using food for things other than physical hunger. Sometimes having odd rituals with food, having food, feeling like you can only really eat in a free way in secret, and also like retrieving food from the trash or anything else that would be you know, sort of outside of like societal norms.
And how can, you know, how can people overcome that? You know, what's the first step to do if they are looking for help, or even people that don't want to go for help, and they just feel it's, you know, I don't have it, I'm okay. But deep
Sure.
down they know you know, they're not okay, they are hurting. How can they, what's the first step they can take, you know, to get help?
Sure. I think for me, you know, and I think for a lot of women who identify with this type of struggle, they think that they're the only one in the world, you know, because and the fact that some of these behaviors are secret, it just contributes to that even more. And then also societal judgment contributes to that even more. And so it ends up being a very, very isolating condition. And so what helped me a lot was knowing that there is a name for this. So compulsive overeating disorder, also known as binge eating disorder, knowing that there is a name and that actually like millions of people struggle with this. So it's like you're far from alone, and that there are people, practitioners who specialize in this, and really to sort of start to dismantle the shame that's associated with it. Because I think that shame, I actually think that personally, I think that the numbers that are reported are an underrepresentation, because there's still so many people that struggle with this in silence, and they're kind of caught in the shame that's both self-imposed and societally imposed. And so it prevents them from getting the help that they really, you know, could benefit from. And all of that being said, so with regard to formal eating disorders, there's 30 million Americans that suffer from a formal eating disorder. And there's actually many more people who struggle with some kind of disordered eating that doesn't meet the full-fledged criteria for, like a full-fledged eating disorder, but at one point or another, engage in behavior with food that is beyond physical hunger. And I think that this is to an extent socially normal, right? There's the quintessential eating ice cream after a breakup or something like that. And so, but there's a fine line between, when it's just, sort of when it is temporary versus when it's more taking over parts of your life and affecting your health, your mental health, your relationships with other people, your relationships with yourself, and that type of thing.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to go back, especially, when anybody, like you've eaten like a whole bag of chips, after you've eaten that, you just feel so ashamed in yourself. And then you are so hard on yourself. And then, you say, tomorrow I'll do better. And then tomorrow comes and something else happens and you eat a whole cake or 2 pieces of cake. It's just that, that guilt that you are constantly carrying inside of you, and you're constantly feeling it will get better, but it does not get better. It's like a wheel that goes and goes and goes and goes. Just that guilty, that shame of, why did I do that again? Also, I want to go back to, like for people that they are like hiding food, like, they're hiding food from their loved ones, so that they can't see what they eat. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Is that also, do that also classify as binge eating and this disorder, or is it something else, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it could. Yeah, it's basically, it's one of the items that can be used for a clinical diagnosis, but that in itself doesn't necessarily. So it's sort of like you need to hit several of like a list of potential symptoms, or classically known symptoms. So that being one of them. The way this showed up for me is, well, on the particular night that's described in the first chapter of my book, we had a housewarming party and I made this dish, jalapeno corn casserole, and it sort of felt like this forbidden splurge kind of food. And I was trying not to eat it all day, and because I was feeling guilty about my weight and that type of thing and how I looked. And then after all my guests left, I ended up eating a lot and then going to bed. And then in bed, I was bothered by it. It was in the fridge still. And I was just like, oh my gosh, it's in there. I need it, and that whole kind of struggle of like, okay, do I just throw it in the garbage? Can I just wait until tomorrow, like a quote normal person? And then, ended up eating like basically the rest of this casserole, and and then had this vomiting later. So it's, I remember distinctly that when I was out on the couch watching TV, eating this casserole, my husband came out to see if I was going to come to bed, and I hid it beside me, next to, kind of between my leg and the couch, so he couldn't see even my husband, and so, but I always did kinds of things like this. If I went to fast food on the way home, I would hide the bags and the containers, and it felt certain foods were were not allowed for me. And so it contributed to the hiding of them. And so that's where diet culture exacerbates this type of problem, because we're taught that certain foods are, quote, bad and not allowed. And then, it contributes more and more to this type of secretive behavior, even with people that you're very intimately close with. And the strange thing about this is that until this happened for me, I didn't really even consciously think of it as being really different or something. It kind of took this event to really make me think, wow, this maybe is really beyond the normal, the quote normal, quote healthy, paradigm.
That's interesting. And you probably talked about this, but I want to go back again.
Sure.
So you were in this, in this scene of overeating, if I can say that. What was the next step that you took, and you told yourself, this is it, I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore? What was that thing that drove you to say, I had enough, I'm going to seek help now, I'm going to get better? What was that one thing?
Yeah, so I actually write about this in the book, of course. And what I reflected on is that I had for a long time sort of thought that being overweight would result in my demise eventually. And I assumed I would, develop heart disease or diabetes or something like this. But the fact that I could have passed away that night from choking on my vomit, it honestly did not occur to me that it could take my life in such an immediate way. And one of the most common misconceptions about eating disorders actually is that they are relatively benign compared to other forms of mental illness. And they actually have the highest mortality rate of all mental illnesses. And so I think the immediacy of that, and I talk about in my book how it felt that like death was no longer a far off and theoretical idea, that it was right there in the room taunting me, like, are you really going to change this time, or are you going to come with me, kind of thing. And so just really the near death experience just really sort of shook me awake, if you will.
Was there times where you told yourself, I'm going to help, I'm going to get help, and then you decided, no, I'm not getting help, and fall back again? Was there times that you wanted to get out of this, and then you didn't?
Well, certainly. There were many times, and in fact, I also write about that it's every birthday, New Year's Eve, seeing people out that you haven't seen in a long time, and, being embarrassed about how one looks, and, all that stuff, how all of those things that would happen every single year throughout the year, it would be like, okay, this is really my chance to change. But the problem is, I think the help that I sought out at the time was actually part of the poison, because when someone mistakes a disordered eating with being overweight and needing another diet, they're actually seeking the poison that is contributing to their problem. It's they're related, of course, like weight can be related to disordered eating, but the cure to disordered eating is not a diet. And in fact, the non-diet approach is what's widely recommended. And so, so I think I sought it out, but I didn't realize at the time that I was seeking out the poison. And also, I had no idea that there were, even that there was a name for this. I thought I was the only person in the world that had this problem, and let alone that there are specialists in this. And so once I really found access to that information, oh, that helped tremendously. But it is a road, because especially being women, we're so conditioned with diet culture and that type of thing that just knowing it, it's not like you snap your fingers and you're suddenly never tempted to go back that way again. It's a gradual untethering, if you will, from that mentality. So it takes time and practice.
Yeah, I always tell my clients that, it's a journey. It's a journey that you walk with yourself, because we all know diets don't work. You can give somebody a diet and you lose 10 pounds in 2 days. That doesn't work. You have to work what's inside of you as well. It's not just about going exercise for 2 hours in the gym and eat the right foods and then you will be fine. So I agree with you. Diets are just not working, and you have to, you also said, emotionally, physically work on yourself, and get that help out there. Now, I wish we can talk more and go more into this. To all the listeners, if you want to get Azures book, Fullness, I will put a link underneath. I'm sure going to read the book and, go and get the book and read the book. And I think just, by reading the first chapter, it sounds like a very good book, for all people out there. Now, what 3 tips will you give someone who's struggling with compulsive overeating disorder? What is the 3 tips you will give them?
Sure. I would say that it's a lot more common than it feels. I had no idea that 30 million Americans suffer with some kind of eating disorder and 70 million globally. And that many more than that suffer with some kind of disordered eating behavior at some point in their lives that doesn't meet the full-fledged criteria. So I think knowing that it's a lot more common than it feels helps a lot. And also to know that in our culture, eating disorders like anorexia have been more popularized, but eating disorders with a binge element are actually 2.5 times more prevalent. And this isn't, comparative. One is not, sort of worse than the other. And, it's not a competition, but, I had never thought of eating disorders as being something that related to binge type behavior. So I think just normalizing it a bit, is the first tip. The second tip is that there's a lot of help out there. So there's, of course, traditional therapy, which can be supplemented with medication as prescribed. But there's also, if that doesn't resonate as much for you, there are other options as well. There's coaching, retreats, other healing modalities that are more that are like non-Western approach that can be very therapeutically beneficial to people. The third is that you can get to a place where food is just food, and it's still glorious food. I think in my struggle, I didn't want food to become macros, the way that maybe like a bodybuilder might think of it, where it's like it's just a composition of fat, carbs, and calories. I wanted to still be able to enjoy brie and mousse au chocolat and like all the wonderful foods that are out there and have it still be glorious food, but have it also at the same time just be food and not be a substitute for nurturing and caring that I was seeking out myself personally, and that other people might do as well. So those would be my 3 tips.
I love that, and I actually love the last one as well, especially when you said, to see food as freedom, not see food as an enemy, and really enjoying food. It was a pleasure having you today. on the show. And yeah, we will look forward to reading your book. I think we all look forward to reading your book. And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and I wish all of your guests the very best.
And thank you for doing such amazing work out there. You are doing amazing work.
Thank you. I really do hope that my sharing something that's so deeply personal and formally sort of shame-filled can really help destigmatize this and help many people be able to talk about this more openly, the way that we have been able to with alcoholism or drug abuse and that type of thing, that where, you know, we can destigmatize this type of issue and also just see people with more compassion, especially when people see someone with a larger body frame or a non-conventional body in general, that we can just have more compassion and know that there's always a backstory and there's always context. And so I just am hoping this can bring so much healing to, you know, to everyone. So thank you so much for helping me share this message.
Thank you for being here.